So there's this map, and historians really don't want to talk about it. It's called the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, but look closer. It shows coastlines that weren't supposed to be discovered for centuries, including Antarctica, without ice, drawn accurately before anyone found it. Now, skeptics say it's just a lucky guess. I don't buy that, because the coastline matches modern radar scans of the bedrock underneath the ice. That means someone mapped Antarctica's shape before it was buried in ice. And that ice has been there for at least 6,000 years. So who was sailing down there before the ice age really locked in? Here's where it gets wild. This map wasn't drawn from scratch. The mapmaker himself wrote a note saying he copied older source maps. Maps that, by his own account, dated back to Alexander the Great's era. And some of those, he claimed, were even older than that. Maps tracing back to a civilization we have basically no record of. A seafaring culture that mapped the entire globe, then vanished without a trace. Sounds like a movie plot, right? But the evidence keeps stacking up. There's a whole family of these old maps, not just one. The Orontius Phineas map, the Haji Ahmed map, same impossible details, all showing land masses that match pre-ice age coastlines, not the world they knew. How do you accidentally draw a coastline that's been hidden for millennia? You don't, unless someone actually sailed it before the ice came. And that brings us to the timing. The ice age ended around 11,700 years ago. Right before that, sea levels were about 400 feet lower than today. That means coastlines existed back then that are now underwater, gone. Entire stretches of shoreline swallowed by the rising oceans forever. So, if a civilization lived on those coastlines, we wouldn't find them. Their cities, their ports, their whole world now sits on the ocean floor. That's not a fringe idea, by the way. Geologists confirm the flooding happened. What's debated is whether anyone sophisticated enough to map it was there. And that's exactly what these maps seem to be claiming. Let's talk about the compass thing for a second. Stay with me. Old maps used something called a true point for their grid lines. On the Piri Reis map, that point isn't where you'd expect. Researchers found the grid actually centers on Egypt using ancient geometry, which means whoever made the source maps understood the Earth's curvature. They were doing spherical trigonometry on maps supposedly from primitive times. That's not a small detail, that's advanced navigation science, way early. So now you've got accurate Antarctic coastlines, advanced geometry, and ancient sourcing. Three things that together really shouldn't exist on a 1513 map. And it's not just this one map. Let's bring in Greenland. Old maps from the same family show Greenland as two separate islands. For centuries, people thought that was just an error, a mistake. Then in the 1900s, ice-penetrating radar revealed something underneath the ice. Greenland's bedrock actually is split into two land masses, hidden by ice. The old maps were right. The wrong modern assumption was wrong. So either it's an insane coincidence, or someone saw Greenland without ice. And Greenland's ice sheet is roughly 110,000 years old in places, which puts our mystery map makers way before recorded history began. Now, here's a question. Why does this matter at all? Because almost every culture on Earth tells a flood story. Almost every one. Mesopotamia, Greece, the Bible, India, China, the Americas, all of them. Mainstream explanations say these are separate myths that just sound similar. But what if they're describing the same event from different coastlines? A global flood caused by rapid ice age melting around 11,700 years ago. Sea levels rose so fast in some periods, it's called meltwater pulse 1A. Up to 400 feet of sea level rise in just a few centuries. If you lived on a coastline back then, your world disappeared. Fast. And if your people had ships and maps and knowledge, you'd run. You'd scatter, spread inland, uphill, anywhere dry, taking your knowledge with you. Fragments of advanced navigation, geometry, and maps handed down for generations. Eventually copied by later cultures who had no idea what they really showed. That's the theory. A lost seafaring culture scattered by the flood. Their knowledge surviving only in scraps, copied again and again over millennia, until those scraps ended up in the hands of a 16th century admiral. Piri Reis himself was a real person, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer. He wasn't claiming magic. He was citing sources, real, older documents. Documents that have since been lost. We only have his copy left, which means the original evidence, the actual source maps, are gone. All we have is this one surviving fragment and a handful of others. Now, I want to be fair here. Not everyone agrees with this. Mainstream historians say these maps are based on Columbus-era exploration data. They argue Antarctica on the map might actually just be South America, stretched. And cartographers back then did stretch and distort coastlines constantly. That's true. So, is it really Antarctica or a badly drawn Tierra del Fuego? Honestly, that's the real debate, and it's not fully settled either way. But the bedrock matching detail is the part that's hardest to explain away. Random distortion matching the actual sub-ice shape. By pure accident? Maybe. Or maybe not. That's the line between mainstream history and this theory. Either way, the maps themselves are real. You can go look at them. The Piri Reis map is kept in Istanbul, in the Topkapi Palace. A torn fragment of animal skin with ink lines that spark this entire debate. Think about that. One surviving piece of parchment, centuries of arguments. And somewhere out there, maybe, the source maps it was copied from? Lost, sunk, or sitting forgotten in some archive, unrecognized for what it is. If a seafaring culture really did map the world before the floods, their cities are underwater, their records are gone, their story is buried. All that's left are echoes, a coastline here, a flood myth there. A strange map that shouldn't make sense, but somehow lines up anyway. I'm not saying it's definitely true. I'm saying it's a wild rabbit hole. And once you start pulling on threads like this, they connect everywhere. Every flood myth starts sounding less like a story and more like a memory. Flood myths, ice age timelines, bedrock maps, ancient geometry, all tangled together. Maybe it's all coincidence, layers of distortion, lucky guesses, and copying errors. Or maybe humanity's history goes back further than the textbooks admit. Either way, that little map in Istanbul keeps the question alive. So next time someone says, we know our whole history, maybe not. There might be a chapter we lost, underwater, waiting to be found. If this kind of mystery gets your brain spinning like it does mine, let me know in the comments. What do you think is really going on? Thanks for hanging out with me on this one. Catch you next time.